So, Sir Richard, where do you think we are from a military point of view in this conflict?
I think we're at a really important point, almost a point where the initiative could fall even more dramatically towards the Ukrainians. What we've seen is this Russian mass attack on multiple axes, a blitzkrieg, which we all assumed, I think, would topple Ukraine pretty quickly, despite the fact that we always knew the Ukrainians would fight really hard. But it hasn't. The Russians have demonstrated they are almost incompetent in the way they have failed to put together a combined arms offensive. They failed to win the air battle. Their logistics has failed. The morale of Russian soldiers, by all accounts, is absolutely rock bottom. And you can't do anything in war with soldiers whose morale is low. On the other hand, the Ukrainians have shown remarkable agility, tenacity, courage, inspiring courage. And they have really fought the Russians to a standstill. Add to that the massive supply of Western anti-tank missiles, anti-aircraft missiles, and the like, and that has all helped the Ukrainians. Coming back to my point about the initiative, we've seen, I think the Russians have, in military terms, culminated, which means effectively that they've run out of momentum. They realize they can't continue to generate the momentum required, particularly in the area around Kiev. And so we're seeing the withdrawal of Russian units back from around Kiev, and an announcement by the Russians that, okay, we're effectively tantamount to saying we failed in our principal objective of subjecting the whole, capturing the whole state. So we're going to focus on the east. And I think now is the moment where, if we were able to provide the right support to the Ukrainians could really get onto the front foot and potentially achieve a decisive effect.
So do you think Ukraine could win this?
I think Ukraine could, achieve. I think, let's put it around the other way. I think the Ukrainians could defeat the Russian army. And I think the Ukrainian, providing the West provides the necessary support to do so.
And what does winning look like?
Well, winning means the collapse of the morale of the Russian army, and the Russian army getting out of Ukraine. That would be winning.
And do you, in your view, would that mean Russia getting out of the whole of the Ukraine? Or do you think that the Russians have this idea that they will just keep a part on the east?
Well, winning for the Russians means being able to say, we've got a land corridor to Crimea, and we have got the republics of Luhansk and Donetsk and probably the Donbass. That would be winning for the Russians. Clearly, winning properly for Ukraine means the last Russian soldier has exited Ukraine, and Ukraine is now a free and unitary sovereign state. I suspect the reality will be that winning for Ukraine is something of a compromise, but it is not the sort of compromise that results in a peace with a dominant Putin still able to call the shots.
And I think that's really interesting what you've just said there. I mean, where do you think there could be wriggle room for some kind of compromise? I mean, what could, would, and should Zelensky be prepared to compromise on, given the fact that he hasn't actually done anything wrong?
I mean, I wouldn't begin to presume to advise President Zelensky for obvious reasons. I mean, he has done awesomely well. My view, though, there will never be peace in Europe while Putin is in the Kremlin. Fact. We can never trust this man. He is a megalomaniac. He is an obsessive. He is obsessed about building a new greater Russia. He has demonstrated psychopathic indifference to the casualties he's caused, and we can never treat with this man. I mean, in a broad sense, in a historical sense, where once again, we are facing a European tyrant steeped in blood, prepared to inflict unspeakable casualties and unspeakable suffering on his neighbors to achieve his political ends. We've been here before. Napoleon, the Kaiser, and Hitler. Putin ranks with them, and we can never have peace in Europe while Putin is in the Kremlin. So there can be no compromise on that score. The only thing you can do is, as far as Ukraine is concerned, is to help them defeat the Russian army and humiliate Putin.
And can Putin be humiliated, or is his mental state going to be that he cannot afford to lose. He cannot afford to be seen to lose in his own country. Will that not just make him do something even more violent and even more abhorrent as a desperate measure?
I think there's a sort of bifurcated answer here. Number one, Putin is humiliated already. He has proved that he is a tyrant with feet of clay, and that his army is simply not up to doing what he expected of it. And he is humiliated because effectively the Russian army have been fought to a standstill. To your second point, you are right, and this is where it is so dangerous, that he has got to seem to be winning. He's got to satisfy himself that he's got to maintain momentum. And the so what out of that is be prepared for escalation. We need to be prepared for some form of escalation. He will not be able to escalate to attack NATO territory in a ground war sense. I would have worried about that 5 weeks ago. That was my worry, that he'd wrap up Ukraine and then turn his attention to NATO territory. He could still do so in future if he recovers. So that's why we've got to keep the momentum up. That's why we have to provide really significant, continue to provide that significant support to the Ukrainians, but actually ramp it up even more with heavy weaponry. So we can take nothing for granted with Putin here. As far as that implication that you suggest somehow ease back in case he gets nasty, no, absolutely not. Now is not the time to be easing back. Putin will only respect strength. And that means we have got to be stronger than him. I mean NATO, has got to ramp up its capability, its defensive capability on the borders of Russia and Ukraine, to demonstrate that there is absolutely no way that Putin can have a go at NATO territory. It's also got to ramp up the supply of weaponry. Now, I mean, just to look at the British alone, staggering numbers of anti-tank weapons, anti-aircraft missiles being sent into Ukraine, which is fantastic. Reports this morning in the New York Times that that Biden is prepared to send tanks to Ukraine. That is exactly what is needed. It's heavy weaponry. It's Patriot missiles, long-range missiles to take down Russian missiles attacking Ukrainian cities, long-range precision anti-artillery in order to hit back at Russian gun batteries, pulverizing Ukrainian cities, and to really take the fight back to the Russians. That, I think, is what could swing it. In a battle, in a campaign, there is a moment when the initiative passes from one to another. There is an opportunity. And it's whoever seizes that initiative when that opportunity presents itself that ultimately.
And you think we are at that point?
I think the next 3 weeks, we're at that point, and the next 3 weeks will be critical.
Today's Times reports that Starstreak, Britain's most advanced portable missile system, is thought to have shot down a Russian helicopter in its first use on the Ukrainian battlefield. I mean, that's the sort of direction of travel you want to see.
Yeah, but more so. What I'd like to be seeing is, and is the West, NATO, mobilizing almost a sort of multi-Berlin airlift to bring the stuff in, to get the stuff in. It's having devastating effect, as that front page of the Times tells us today. But we need to do more of that. And the reality is that the tempo of this war means the Ukrainians are using up a week's supply of anti-tank weapons in 24 hours. So we've got to keep that moving. We've got to mobilize the manufacturers. We've got to mobilize the supply lines in order to seriously ramp it up. And we need to mobilize the training too. They've got to be trained in how to use it. And they've demonstrated that with the Starstreak story, that with the right training, they know how to use it.
So, Richard, we've got a couple of minutes left. A few other points I want to put to you. Last night, Zelensky spoke with Fox News, and he said it's a mistake for NATO to not admit Ukraine as a member, because in his words, if we join NATO, we make NATO much stronger. What's your response to that?
I think it was a mistake by NATO to promise NATO membership to Ukraine in 2008 without providing the military means to guarantee collective defense for Ukraine. And so I think the NATO will have to look very hard at NATO membership for Ukraine when and if the dust settles, but be under no illusions NATO membership of Ukraine means NATO stationing really significant forces in Ukraine to guarantee collective defense. Now, that is going to be a very hard political sell to NATO countries who at best are struggling to maintain a level of minimum defense spending, but who in reality now need to see defense spending ramp up to levels not seen since the Cold War.
And speaking of defence spending, much criticism that there isn't enough defence spending here in this country. I mean, you've spoken out about defence cuts in the past. Where would you like to see defence spending go here in the UK?
Well, I think there needs to be a fundamental mental shift in government and in society as a whole that recognizes that we will never see peace in Europe while Putin is in the Kremlin, that recognizes that our task is to ensure that the hot war in Ukraine does not become a hot war for the whole of Europe, and recognizes that in order to ensure at the very best a Cold War, we need to prepare for war. It's the old Roman maxim of if you wish for peace, prepare for war applies here. And that means really ramping up defense spending, because be under no illusions, the successive reduction in defense spending by countries like Britain under successive governments in the last decade and a half has absolutely sent a signal to Putin and has gone into his calculus, which has resulted in this invasion, because he thinks that NATO is an alliance with feet of straw. We've got to demonstrate through effective deterrence that that is not the case, and that means a significant increase in defense spending.
And final question, you wrote a book in 2017, War with Russia, which used your knowledge. It was a sort of semi-fictionalized scenario where we go to war with Russia. Do you feel your warning fell on deaf ears?
Oh, unquestionably. Unquestionably. I mean, I wasn't alone. There were plenty of people who thought like I did, plenty of watchers of Russia who may have thought like I did. And those who knew Russia well. The reality is, as I said in the book, the war with Russia started in Ukraine in March 2014. Actually, it probably started in Georgia in 2008. And when I published the book, actually the book was published in 2016, it was treated with derision by many at the highest levels of government who did not want to hear that message.